Hi gang, so in this video I am going to be talking about my struggles with mental health, depression, anxiety, and long COVID. I have been a bit nervous to do this video because generally when I do videos, I like to leave the video or end the video with some sort of clarity about whatever I'm talking about. But in this video, it's not going to go that way because I've been struggling and I'm still struggling quite a bit. Don't want to fall apart at this moment. Just a brief history. I came to Germany in October of 2015. At first, things seemed okay. Things seemed to be going well. I had come here to start a master's in sociology, and I came to Germany with my then boyfriend, now husband. And when I came here, I felt really positive about the trajectory I was on. I felt that I was leaving some difficult memories and just dynamics behind, and it felt like a good fresh start. But I quickly realized that I wasn't adjusting as well as I thought I would. I had a huge problem with the language and what that meant for my identity, because I feel like a big part of my identity is being able to communicate well. And in this country, when I don't speak the language, where I don't speak the language fluently, that part of my identity is very much gone. I feel very insecure about how people see me and their perception of me as a foreigner, I suppose. Also compounded with my ethnic presentation. Back in Singapore, I was part of the ethnic majority, and here that's just not the case anymore, although I don't feel it bothers me as much as my language ability. So then at some point during my studies, I had a breakdown, and I think that had very much to do with an incident with a friend who was having mental health issues herself, and she was going through psychosis. And myself, my boyfriend, now husband, and our friends were trying to help her through that difficult time, but there were lots of issues in terms of the mental health system. She was also not German. She was from another country, and the language issue was also a problem. And I really wanted to help, but I couldn't in the way that I wanted to. And she ended up leaving to go back home. And I think that really shattered my self-confidence somewhat. Somehow I felt as if it was my duty to help her. Looking back, of course, I can see that it wasn't realistic because, this problem was, or this issue was so much bigger than me. I kind of became paralyzed after that. I became very anxious about assignments. I was terrified of emailing my professors. I was terrified of completing any assignments. I became paralyzed, and then I became very, very depressed. There were probably a lot of other issues that were presenting itself during that time. It was this guilt and shame about not being financially independent. A lot of anxiety about a lot of things. My relationship with my boyfriend was strained, I think, because of a lot of the coping skills that I had. They weren't the best. If I was upset about something, I wouldn't really want to talk about it properly. Sometimes I would feel very strongly about a situation and I would shut down. Obviously, the issue never got resolved because I just stopped talking about it and I just waited for the issue to go away. But it would always resurface. it would always come back, and it was hurting our relationship. And later in therapy, I learned that that was probably because I never developed any sort of conflict resolution skills based on the family dynamics that I had growing up. That was just how I operated growing up, and I carried it into my future relationships. Yeah, at some point, I was just not functional anymore. I couldn't do anything. I didn't want to do anything. I was crying. I was feeling miserable. All I wanted to do was sleep. And I was terrified about a lot of things. I didn't want to talk to my parents. I didn't want to talk to any friends. I was just stuck. And I could only rely on Martin for my emotional support. And it was also taking a toll on him. And he suggested that I see a therapist. And at first I resisted, but then I eventually went. Through that, as well as through medication, I finally started gaining some momentum again. It was very slow, but I was gaining a little bit more functionality as the months and the years went by. So I started attending classes again, and I felt like I was slowly getting back some momentum. I was slowly beginning to communicate more with Martin about my, whenever we had a conflict, I would communicate better, and just like little things were improving in our lives. Circumstances in my life changed a little bit. I got married, and I felt that there was this extra level of security, because I would be really anxious when it came to prolonging my student visa. It was just really difficult. After I got married, I felt things were rapidly improving in my life. I was having a better relationship with Martin's family. I was being a lot more social than I used to be. I started a part-time job. I was going to classes again. I felt like I had things were getting a lot better for me. And that was when I wanted to stop taking my medication, sertraline, because I do have some side effects from taking sertraline, and one of them being derealization and depersonalization. And just this feeling that, I'm on a good trajectory and I don't need them anymore to regulate my energy levels, regulate my mood levels. So at some point, Russia invaded Ukraine, and I was feeling very helpless and unsettled, and I wanted to do something to help. And so I asked Martin if we could let some refugees stay with us. And he agreed, and we did. And I was feeling really positive about doing that. I was feeling like I was helping people. I felt good about myself. I felt good about my self-esteem. And at some point, I contracted COVID. So during the time that I contracted COVID, I decided that I wanted to quit my medication altogether. I had slowly tapered off, and then on the week that I got COVID, I felt like this week is so bad. Let me just not taper it as recommended and just quit it, because I feel so bad already. My body doesn't know what's up, what's down. And so if I experience the effects of withdrawals from sertraline, I don't care anymore. I just want to get off this medication. I don't recommend that you do that. You're supposed to taper it off, and you're supposed to do it under the guidance of a psychiatrist. Unfortunately for me, I had lost trust in the psychiatrist that I was seeing. There were a few incidences where I would be told one thing and be told another thing from other medical health professionals. I should have gone to a different psychiatrist at that time, and listen to their advice instead of trying to do things on my own. Right after that, I was feeling really positive. I was visiting my friends a lot. I got off the medication. I feel good. I'm helping people. And then at some point, there was a very stressful family-related incident. I don't really want to get into it. It's very personal. I had a personal conflict with a family member. Around that time, my therapist had been, telling me that if I want to get off sertraline, I should really start exercising. And I had always been resistant to exercise just because I don't like doing exercise. When I returned from this family trip and after the stressful incident, I tried to start exercising because I thought part of the conflict was also due to some fatigue that I was experiencing. And a few days afterwards, like my long COVID symptoms came back really strongly. So I had some breathlessness right after the major symptoms of COVID went away and I tested negative. But there was always some breathlessness and fatigue and just like, I'm not as capable as I am to do as many things anymore. But it was never a huge problem. I was trying to pace myself as much as I could. But that week, after that stressful incident and after I had tried to exert myself at the gym, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My body just couldn't take it anymore. I was extremely breathless. I was standing in the supermarket. I was feeling so lightheaded. I was so tired. I was so fatigued. Because of my history with depression, and because of how my depressive symptoms manifest themselves, my main depressive symptom has typically been fatigue. I couldn't really tell where this fatigue was entirely coming from. A lot of it probably had to do with this long COVID breathlessness thing because my heartbeat was very high. When I was fatigued with depression, my heartbeat wasn't that high and I was also not feeling breathless. So I could see that there was some sort of distinction there. The long fatigue and the depression symptoms may have been compounded together. The doctors couldn't really give me an answer. He just said yeah, it's going to get better with time. So at that time, I just wanted to rest. And so eventually I rested as much as I possibly could. And my therapist was encouraging me to still do some sort of physical activity, maybe not going to the gym, like she suggested, but she was also suggesting that, I still take some walks around the block, that kind of thing. I was resistant to this idea because I had started reading about chronic fatigue syndrome. It seemed to echo what I was experiencing. I don't know if I went about that in the best way possible. I think right now a lot of people are dealing with the effects of long COVID and also flying blind because the medical community does not seem to have very clear-cut answers about what to do. And like I said, when I went to my GP, he was just like, "Oh, I don't know I can't tell you anything except that it will probably get better." He referred me to a lung doctor, but the waiting times to see these specialists are really long. There's a lot of people with complications. The healthcare system seems to be overburdened. And because of what we've gone through with the pandemic, all the stress, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the political situation, gas prices, inflation, and then climate change, forest fires, extreme weather conditions. People are increasingly presenting with depression and anxiety. People are finding it very difficult to cope. People are losing their jobs. It's a difficult time. I wanted to really rest my body and let it recover from these symptoms of long COVID. Unfortunately, I don't know if they're going to reappear. It's very possible that it will again. But at some point I noticed that my symptoms were lessening. And you would think that would be a good thing. But for me, I think I started becoming more and more anxious. And all of my old fears kind of resurfaced again. Feeling like I'm worthless, feeling like I'm useless, I'm not earning any money, and that, like, having a low self-esteem, that kind of thing. Because at some point I was doing social media for a company, and then when this long COVID fatigue hit, I said that I wanted to stop. I wanted to take care of my health. And then right after I started improving my health, I got into the old thinking habits again. Those feeling unproductive, feeling demoralized, and I was feeling incredibly lonely. I was starting to miss my friends back in Singapore. And I have friends here in Germany that I can see, that I can talk to, that I can relate to. And slowly, as time had gone on, I started improving my relationship with Martin's side of the family. Unfortunately, right after that stressful encounter, I felt that that was inaccessible to me again. We definitely have the ability to reconcile and probably move past this conflict. But at that point of time, that didn't feel true for me. I felt that everything was going terribly, terribly, terribly wrong. I think after I started gaining a bit more energy back, I was starting to become very anxious about my situation, and I was having extremely negative thoughts about everything. It felt that my despair had come back intensely. So I was at the point where, again, it's a difficult place to be in, because I I didn't want to eat. And usually thinking of, some nice meals or something would interest me a little bit, and I would look forward to that specific meal, but I couldn't do that. I would think of food and be like, I don't want to eat anything. I don't. And I was trying to think of anything that would make me feel a little bit better. And I was thinking maybe I should watch Golden Girls, because Golden Girls has always been a show that I fall back on when I'm feeling down, but I didn't even want to watch that. It felt that nothing could make me even a little bit happier than where I was. And I was in just utter despair. I realized that I had to reach out to friends because, I needed to talk to someone. For the most part, I feel that they were encouraging. There was one particular disagreement with a friend of mine, and she's probably going to be watching this. There was one particular part of the conversation that was upsetting to me. I was telling her how bad I felt, and she seemed quite frustrated at me for not wanting to get back on sertraline. And she explained to me, her thought process behind that, and I get it. I understand why. She saw that I was in such pain, and she really genuinely believes that the medication can be a big help to me, and it possibly could be. And if I decide to get back on it, then that will be my decision. But in that moment, for me, that hearing that wasn't necessarily helpful, because there are so many reasons why I wanted to get off sertraline. Whatever your experience with medication is, I think this is a very personal decision that should be made between patient and medical health professionals. And I think where I was in my headspace leading up to that decision was that I felt a loss of trust in the healthcare professionals. Also, there are concerns with supply chain issues, because my body reacts very acutely to any brand changes. I'm not saying don't take SSRIs. If it works for you and it's beneficial to you and the benefits outweigh the cons, then, make that decision for yourself with your healthcare provider. But similarly, I feel that my decision to not want to take the medication is also very valid, and I don't want to be judged negatively for not wanting to be on them. I know that my friend, when she said what she said it with the best of intentions in wanting to help me. She also has her own personal reasons why she reacted so strongly to the topic of medication. These past few weeks have been very, very difficult for me. I went through a week of feeling, extreme despair and lack of motivation. And then I went through a week of anxiety. I think I was feeling really, really anxious. At some point, I decided I wanted to try St. John's wort, which is, I think, Johanniskraut in German, in Deutsch, because I had read about its ability to help with depression, with anxiety, and also as a mood regulator. And it's not an SSRI. So I had this hope that it would not affect me in the same way, or I wouldn't have the same kind of side effects that I had with taking sertraline. So I gave it a shot. The morning I started taking St. John's wort, I was feeling anxious, and throughout the day that anxiousness kind of remained at that same level. And for the next few days, I was feeling really anxious as well. The first night, I had experienced diarrhea at 4 a.m. in the morning. I also do have an issue with irritable bowel syndrome, but usually it would not wake me up in the middle of the night. It has happened before, but it hasn't happened for a long time. And then the next day, same time, I woke up at, I think, about 4 or 5 a.m. with diarrhea. On the third day, I started having headache, confusion, just this imbalance when I moved from one position to another. And those confusion and the headache and the imbalance started getting worse. So on the fourth day, I decided that would be my last day with St. John's wort. My body felt really confused, and I just didn't want to prolong this anymore. So my plan is to find a different psychiatrist and talk to them about St. John's wort, what I can expect with the side effects, if they will subside with time, and maybe should I be on a smaller dose. So I want to wait until I talk to someone. When I started SSRIs, when I started sertraline, I did experience intense side effects from the very moment I started taking them. And my therapist informed me that usually people don't react this strongly to the medication when they first start taking it. So her interpretation is that I have a very sensitive body. That may not be the case with every single medication out there, but so far it seems that what I take usually affects me some way. So another thing about the St. John's wort that I took is that it's made in Germany. I believe it's called Life 900. The dosage is 900 milligrams per day, and this is the standard dosing that they recommend. I think if you are in the US, the dosage would be different. Yeah. Initially, I had ended sessions with my therapist, and I wasn't sure if I was going to look for another therapist. Again, like I said, in that specific period of time, I felt as if I had everything together. I was overestimating my ability to cope. I was, having very polarized thoughts about my experiences. A better way to go about things, as I see it now, would be to switch my psychiatrist and talk about reducing medication that way. And for the issues with my therapist, it would have been much better for me to confront her with my issues and discuss them properly and in depth. And if I still felt that the therapy sessions weren't going the way that I wanted, I should have continued having her as a therapist until I could find a replacement. I think you might have also seen in the news recently about the study done by Joanna Moncrief. The key point of that paper was to underscore that people are not depressed because they don't have enough serotonin in their brains. So I think this is a very prevalent belief in the public, and I think that was the main point of this article that was being published. I first heard about this study when I was watching Therapy in a Nutshell. It's a YouTube channel. I will link it down below if you're interested to check it out. I am by no means any sort of medical expert, and if you want to talk about this seriously, I think you need to talk to a healthcare professional. So I'm just going to read out what the lead author wrote in a press release. Patients should not be told that depression is caused by low serotonin or by chemical imbalance, and they should not be led to believe that antidepressants work by targeting these hypothetical and unproven abnormalities. In particular, the idea that antidepressants work in the same way as insulin for diabetes is completely misleading. We do not understand what antidepressants are doing to the brain exactly, and giving people this sort of misinformation prevents them from making an informed decision about whether to take antidepressants or not. And then she further expanded in this article. She said antidepressant use has reached epidemic proportions across the world and is still rising, especially among young people. Many people who take them suffer side effects and withdrawal problems that can be really severe and debilitating. A major driver of this situation is the false belief that depression is due to a chemical imbalance. It's high time to inform the public that this belief is not grounded in science. However, there has been this rebuttal from the scientific community that says, regardless of this fact, antidepressants are still proven to be effective. Expert reaction to a review paper on the serotonin theory of depression. This is a professor of neurobiology and chair of Department of Neurology and Neurobiology Research Unit, Copenhagen University Hospital, Denmark said. The authors justified the need for such a review by saying that it is a public misconception that depression is caused by low brain serotonin. The main misconception is, however, that depression is a single disease with a single biochemical deficit. Today, it is largely accepted that depression is a heterogeneous disorder with potentially multiple underlying causes. The review aims to uncover existing evidence for a serotonergic deficit, but the studies included in the review use methodologies that only generate proxies for the real question, which is if synaptic 5-HT, which is serotonin, concentration, and release are altered in the subsets of patients with major depression. Another statement, the hypothesis that depression was caused by a chemical imbalance in serotonin was a really important step forward in the middle of the 20th century. Since then, there is a huge amount of research which tells us that the brain serotonin systems plays very important roles in how our brains process different emotions. The findings of this umbrella review are really unsurprising. Depression has lots of different symptoms, and I don't think I've met any serious scientists or psychiatrists who think that all causes of depression are caused by a simple chemical imbalance in serotonin. What remains possible is that for some people with certain types of depression, that changes in the serotonin system may be contributing to their symptoms. The problem with this review is that it isn't able to answer that question because it has lumped together depression as if it is a single disorder, which from a biological perspective does not make sense. Many of us know that taking paracetamol can be helpful for headaches, and I don't think anyone believes that headaches are caused by not enough paracetamol in the brain. The same logic applies to depression and medicines used to treat depression. There is consistent evidence that antidepressant medicines can be helpful in the treatment of depression and can be life-saving. Antidepressant medicines are one type of treatment alongside other types of treatment like psychotherapy. Patients must have access to evidence-based treatments for depression, and anyone taking any treatment for depression who is contemplating stopping treatment should discuss this with their doctors first. So another thing about this particular paper on the serotonin theory of depression is that it has been picked up by a lot of media outlets using it as a basis for saying that this serotonin theory doesn't work, and therefore antidepressants are all bullshit and we shouldn't be taking them. So what the medical community is saying is that no, antidepressants still work. We don't exactly know how it works, but it still is effective. It just doesn't work in the way that the majority of the public believes it to. So something that I think could be helpful is this article, Serotonin Doesn't Cause Depression. So what does? I'm not going to go extensively into each paragraph, but the first one is about neuroplasticity. And in this paragraph, it talks about how antidepressants as well as psychedelics may positively influence neuroplasticity and then in turn have a positive influence on depression. Another paragraph is about inflammation. And this paragraph kind of talks a bit about the pandemic. So at least from what I understand, the COVID-19 virus, it elicits a very strong immune response. And when the body issues an immune response, there is inflammation. I also have been reading a bit about anxiety and long COVID, especially when I was going through my very anxious phase after my intense fatigue phase related to long COVID. I started delving into the topic and I found an article. Researchers found that brain inflammation and nerve cell damage in long COVID patients, including those who were never hospitalized, are linked to the development of anxiety. So I don't know if there's any brain inflammation or nerve cell damage. Okay, I don't have any, I've not gone through that kind of assessment. I do know that when I got my blood test results back, there were indications of inflammation in my body. When I got my blood test results back, my blood sedimentation was slightly high and my C-reactive protein levels were slightly high. And both of those are indicators of inflammation. Another paragraph is about the gut-brain connection and about how bacteria in our gut can somehow influence our brain functioning through the vagus nerve, as well as an impact on the immune system. And again, this relates back to inflammation. The next paragraph is about endocrine hormonal changes. This paragraph talks about a dysregulation of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal HPA axis, also known as the stress system, and that this regulation is a precursor for an increased risk of depression. So, for example, people with an episode of major depression are 2.5 times more likely to have experienced a stressful event prior. Me, always me. So this HPA system balance may contribute to depression by negatively impacting the hippocampus, increasing inflammation, damaging neuroplasticity, and killing off neurons. A number of strategies have been shown to be successful in regulating HPA function, ranging from daily meditation to regular exercise to time in nature. There's a lot more to this article, so if you are interested, it will be linked down below. These are some bits of information. Look at the articles if you are interested in it. But if you're trying to diagnose yourself or something, please don't do that. Talk to talk to a healthcare professional that you can trust. Please talk to a healthcare professional that you feel has the time and patience to explain things properly to you. And hopefully you will come away feeling better informed. I wanted to do this video also to try to gain back some self-esteem, gain back a bit of rhythm, going back to things that I like doing or used to like doing. So if there's anything I can say to you, if you're struggling with any of the issues that I'm struggling with currently, is that you're not alone in your suffering. And I don't know if that brings you any comfort, but if it does, then I'm glad for it. So that's it for me, and ciao for now.